to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Season 7 of Raising Teens. I'm Collett Smart and I'm a psychologist, a teacher, and your host on Raising Teens. I'm also a parent and I'm in the middle of raising my own teens and young adult children. I know that raising teens can be fun and crazy and exciting, but also terrifying and even lonely. I've experienced all of these emotions, sometimes in the same day. On this podcast, I'm joined by well-known experts, and we will chat about some of the most common questions that I get asked about raising teenagers in my own work, and even some questions I have myself. I've loved seeing all your questions come in, so this season I'm going to focus on some that teachers, parents, and carers have raised. We're all caring for the teens we love so much, so please send in your ideas and your questions through my Instagram and Facebook page or via the Hope Podcast webpage so we can support this generation of teens together. We often say sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never harm me. But the thing is, sticks and stones are actually assault, and words do harm us. This is the first time we are doing a 2-part mini-series on bullying. It's a big topic, and so I decided to break this into 2 of the main perspectives. So that is the person experiencing bullying in part 1 and the bystanders in part 2. To tackle this, I'm joined by Lucy Thomas. Growing up, Lucy always thought that someone should really do something about bullying and then realized I am that someone. Now, more than a decade after co-launching Project Rockit, Lucy's whole life is dedicated to the cause. As a keynote speaker and facilitator with a blended academic background in psychology and creative arts, Lucy has personally worked with hundreds of thousands of young people all over the world, from Wangaratta to Texas. Lucy's work has been honoured by UNICEF, the University of Melbourne, the Foundation of Young Australians, the Global Family Online Safety Institute, and others. Lucy is also a recipient of an Order of Australia Medal for service to youth and the issue of bullying. And Lucy has since wrapped these personal learnings into a widely received TEDx talk, Kindness, the Ultimate Rebellion Against Bullying. Lucy, would you like to tell us a little bit about where you are at the moment? I have lots of different guests who are coming from all different parts of the country, so we'd love to hear where you are at right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, my name's Lucy and I am coming to you today from Melbourne, Australia, on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. So I want to start by sharing my respect for elders past and present. And also we're going to have some conversations today about bullying. And I just want to acknowledge the continuing leadership of our Aboriginal elders in fighting against bullying and the continuing history of injustice in this country. So all of the conversations we're going to have, I guess I just want to name that we're following in the footsteps of those who have come before us.
Thank you, Lucy. So tell me a little bit. I have followed your work for a very, very long time. I've been in this country for almost 20 years and really early on arriving here, your name and Rosie's name started to pop up. I think I first heard about you through Dr. Michael Carr-Gregg, if I recall. I know he's a big friend of yours. And so tell my listeners a little bit about your work and Project Rockit.
Cool. So Project Rockit started out as a very small community project that was launched by my little sister Ro and I when we were fresh out of school. Full disclosure is that I never intended to start an organisation or a career. I was just one of those young people that you hear about who was really frustrated by bullying and wanted to do something about it. For us, we'd grown up with a lot in common as siblings. We had really different people and had very different teen experiences, but were raised by a really passionate and fierce, staunch single mum who instilled into us the values of social justice and was never one to commiserate when we came home from school and we'd seen something unfair or unjust. Her answer was never to sympathise. It was always well, what are you going to do about it? And so when we finished school, Ro and I got talking about how many times there were, and for all of us growing up, where you see something you disagree with, but the gap between disagreeing or feeling not okay about what's happening around you and actually taking action can feel like a gulf.
Yes.
And that's when we decided to launch Project Rockit as our own small community project that actually elevated young people to the position where they could take action on the issues most pressing and important to them in the world around them.
Yes, so much of what Project Rockit does is about young people's voices. And that's what was quite impactful for me when I first saw your work emerging, was young people talking about one of the biggest issues they face, bullying in all its forms. Young people talking about what they might do or what it meant to them. And you just mentioned there, the gulf can be so huge between, knowing something is wrong or out of place, but actually knowing what to do and having meaningful solutions is really tricky. And I love that you have really worked at finding something that, I mean, for example, I looked at your website as well, and on there you say, young people are often just told to, just walk away, or just ignore it. And how many times I remember in my teaching years and even in psychology that phrase or those phrases are the ones that keep being said to young people, and they don't find them helpful. So I can't wait to get into today some of the real nuts and bolts of what you do. So let's just start firstly by defining bullying for our listener. What is it and what is it not?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great place to start. So I think in the literature, bullying is commonly understood to involve a deliberate abuse of power in relationships or in an interaction through verbal or physical or other kind of relational actions that are deliberately, intentionally used to cause harm. And that harm might be physical harm or hurt. It might be social harm, or it could be psychological harm as well. So there are three key elements in that definition we can ask ourselves. First of all, is it intentional or on purpose? Secondly, is there an imbalance of power, whether that be physical power or perceived power? And finally, is it ongoing or repeated? Does it form a pattern? And the challenge with this definition is that one of the difficulties is that a lot of young people's experiences of bullying don't always match this literature and this research.
Okay.
But it's generally agreed that bullying is not an argument between friends, or it's not a one-off disagreement or misunderstanding. It's not an accident, although that's often an excuse that's used.
Yes.
It isn't always obvious either. It might be something that is happening out in the open, but contrastingly, it might be happening covertly through relationships or through technology as a facilitator as well. But one thing's for sure, and a common misconception in this country, in Australia, is that bullying is definitely not a joke.
Yes, yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that is so often used by adults and children. Oh, I was just joking. And it's not a joke. You're absolutely right. We kind of think of one of the more, I suppose, modern forms of bullying as something that happens online. Can you just chat a little bit about what that might look like and the various forms of online or cyberbullying that you see happening or you see reported?
Yeah, great question. I think the first point that I'd love to name here is that while the expression of the behavior looks different, often the motivation, the underlying intention comes from a really similar place as, our traditional bullying offline. There might be a desire to have power over someone else, and technology can be a facilitator of that. It might be that you're retaliating, or you're envious of somebody, or you're angry with them, or your desire is to humiliate or subjugate them. But ultimately, often it's that same wrestle for power that we talk about when we understand kind of schoolyard bullying. But the behaviours can look quite different. One of the most prominent forms that we see working with Aussie teens is around image-based abuse currently. All of us walk around with a computer in our hands, and that is internet enabled, and it has a high quality camera that can film and take photos as well. And image-based abuse might be taking and sharing images without consent, or it could be publishing a private image of somebody that they willingly shared with you but didn't consent to you sharing with others. You can imagine the impacts of that can be absolutely devastating. Yeah. It might be digitally manipulating an image so that it looks like you, but it's not. It might be setting up a hate account to anonymously target a particular person. It could be doxing, which means sharing someone's real world details online so that other people can kind of, really target or intimidate them in person. It could be identity deceptions are really common ones, sadly, where I might impersonate somebody who is a close friend of yours and use that impersonation to access all kinds of secrets or personal details that I then share with a wider audience. Of course, there's old-fashioned harassment, trolling, the sheer volume of hate that you can direct at a person when you have the time and means to do so. So, unfortunately, there are a lot of ways that technology can be used to make life pretty difficult for teens.
Yeah, and it can feel quite exhausting, I think, for parents and teens themselves. And, we've been hearing this for a long time, how bullying now follows young people home. It's not just on the sporting field or at their after-school activity or at school. It continues at home. It's important here that we talk about the types of bullying. Bullying No Way and other organizations list a few types of bullying. The first is physical bullying. So that's the stuff that hurts or harms a person's body. It could be shoving them, knocking their books to the floor, pretending to accidentally trip them, or even throwing that scrunched up piece of paper at their head across the classroom. Physical bullying can also include things like damaging possessions. Cyberbullying, this could be mean or embarrassing images, texts, posts, videos, or emails sent to the victim or even said about the victim in a group chat. Verbal bullying, these include words that make a person feel upset, angry, or embarrassed. It could be things like teasing, name-calling, even yelling across at them. Social bullying is something done to hurt your reputation. It can be verbal, like spreading rumors or playing mean jokes, or non-verbal, like pretending not to hear a person when they speak or leaving them out of a situation. Sexualized bullying, that is degrading someone using sexual language about appearance or about their sexuality or gender used as a weapon. Within each of these, we see 4 bullying tactics used. That is, bullying can be direct, so happening to you. It could be online or face-to-face, often insults or even exclusions from parties. Indirect is happening behind your back. So this could look like chat groups set up about a person or giggles when you walk into a room. It could also be overt, so it's very obvious to those watching and observing, but it can very often be done where adults won't see. Covert bullying is the subtle, hard-to-prove bullying, like sticking your foot out or saying something like, "Can't you take a joke?" Or it's done when others aren't around. These can be tricky to pinpoint when an adult doesn't pick up what is going on. We need to remember that bullying can be all of these or anything in between. Are we seeing different patterns, say, in schoolyards versus sporting or activity groups, or is there are you saying it's similar patterns no matter where you are, where you find yourself?
Yeah, I think there are commonalities. I think bullying thrives in situations where apathy is present and rife, in situations with, very traditional and stifling power structures because of that, desire to take power over someone else. I mentioned that Project Rockit started as a community project, but today it's been 17 years and we've worked in many school settings, reaching over 500,000 young Australians. And so our insights into the way that these behaviours are playing out in the schoolyard are ever evolving and complex. Technology has obviously been transformative, and especially among the generation that are more digitally literate than any before. And so we know that, technology transforms the dynamics of the schoolyard in really healthy ways in some cases, and in others. It can disrupt traditional power structures and hierarchies. It can give, young people that may have been marginalised or may not have traditional academic skills new pathways to forge their agency. But at the same time, it can be another vehicle for bullying as well. And so especially when it's playing out, no longer within the confines of the school day, and can be something that happens online well into the night. But even just thinking about the way that technology has implicated bullying that happens between people, there's obviously a lot more information, a lot more context behind any singular episode of bullying. And often it means that the whole peer group will be involved.
When you talk about the whole peer group, because this is particularly a podcast about raising teens, does the type or manner of bullying change with age once young people hit the teen years or high school?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I'd say one of the challenges I have with umbrella terms like bullying and cyberbullying is I think that as adults, we tend to use them as an umbrella term to describe a constellation of behaviours that among adults we treat with much more complexity. So when we're talking about teen and childhood bullying, we're actually talking about abuse. We're talking about racism and trolling and homophobia and harassment and violence. And so it's really important to, as you said, to acknowledge the differences in those behaviours over time. We notice when we work with primary school age students that a lot of the time these behaviours emerge as a genuine lack of skills or literacy around managing conflict or social relationships. And that's why it's so important that we're not just targeting what to do if you're bullied, but we're actually empowering, kids to speak to, their anger, or to be able to develop, social and emotional literacy, to be able to navigate the kind of relationships that come around primary school, and working out how to be a good friend, how to be a good support, how to navigate change and cultivate that resilience. Into secondary school, we definitely see a lot more of those kind of intentional harmful behaviours that will emerge around year 7, year 8 as social hierarchies are forming and as our online worlds kind of explode. And so you do find, though, that over time, often by year 10, year 11, year 12, those kind of performative, deliberate, acting out kind of behaviours have often subsided, and a lot of teens will be letting go of those popularity, social hierarchy, social ladders to actually form their own kind of reclaimed relationships. So you definitely do see an arc, but I also see these behaviours extend well into adulthood. And that's, I think, a really important thing to acknowledge as well. So there's no clear developmental pathway when it comes to bullying behaviours.
TV shows and movies have almost programmed the way we think about bullying. We see the textbook examples of slamming someone against the locker or putting their head in the toilet, sending someone else's naked images around the class, or someone left naked in the middle of the oval. Based on what we've spoken about before, we can be really tempted to think of these as extreme forms of physical and sexual bullying. While I'm not minimizing bullying, these behaviors would not simply land someone in school detention. These would actually be classified as criminal behaviors. Your child has the right to an education without being bullied. But remember, your child also has legal rights to not be sexually or physically assaulted. In these situations, you and your child and the school need to be aware of what is classified as being mean, being bullied, and a crime being committed. So if you believe there is a crime being committed, approach the school, but you might also call helpline or talk to the police anonymously if you need to seek advice for the next steps. It can be really subtle and parents can miss signs of something happening. What do you encourage parents or even schools to look out for? What are they looking for?
Well, firstly, I think one of the hallmarks of being bullied, as you can well imagine, is a sense of deep shame and humiliation. Yeah. Often this is happening in front of an unimaginably large audience, as compared to the traditional bullying that might be happening in front of a select group of peers. And so understanding that with shame and humiliation, we do tend to go inward. And so I would say that the first sign you can look out for is that kind of that idea that, your young person might be becoming more socially withdrawn. If there are sudden changes in their social patterns, who they're hanging out with, maybe they're spending more and more time online, which sounds counterintuitive because you think if you're being bullied, you'd want to go offline. But of course, we also hear from a lot of young people that they want to know what's being said about them and they want to understand. Or maybe they might cut off their online activity altogether. Maybe they might become secretive about their device or suddenly visibly anxious when they get a notification or they're checking their social media. All of these behaviours can be signs that something's happening. I wouldn't leap to conclusions. It doesn't mean they're experiencing horrific cyberbullying, but definitely that something's changed or is happening in their digital lives, and that's a good prompt for us to reach out and connect with them.
Bullying causes lots of individual issues. These might include depression, anxiety disorders, panic attacks, post-traumatic stress disorder, social difficulties, and they can even change a child's personality. So signs that you might look out for if you suspect that your child is being bullied might include physical symptoms. So things like your child complaining about feeling sick or having trouble sleeping, nightmares. Then suddenly your child's refusing to go to school or being anxious about going to school or somewhere they've had no previous issue attending. You might see signs of your child doing badly in a subject that they previously enjoyed and were even good at. They might start withdrawing from social activities. You might see a drop in their self-esteem, missing belongings, wondering where that school hat keeps disappearing to, or the school jumper, having injuries that they can't explain. These could all indicate bullying or criminal behaviors that I spoke about before. Then what can parents or carers, if they hear that their child is being bullied, they may have heard it from somebody else, or they might get an inkling that it's happening with their child, their teenager. Let's first start with, what should they not do?
Ooh, yep. Okay, cool. So this is a really difficult piece of advice to hear, I think. But my first suggestion would be to not start with telling them to switch off their device. And unless it's completely necessary, I actually wouldn't recommend taking their phone away as a first step. There are a number of reasons for this. First of all, we hear from young people that this is why they don't come forward and talk to an adult, that they're worried that if they do, they'll have their device taken away or that they'll be in trouble. And they often perceive this as a punishment, even if it's intended for their own good, which is heartbreaking. But it can really discourage them from opening up. It can make them regret coming forward, but it can also cut them off from their potential social support. So a lot of young people that experience bullying, whether that be online or offline, actually find whole communities with shared experience with whom they can access support online. And so maybe they may indeed be spending more time online because they're actually accessing survivor communities or mental health services that are able to support them. So I think as a first step, it's important that we understand before we leap to those conclusions, and sometimes it might be necessary. The second thing I'd suggest is we don't advise them to retaliate. Like maybe when you were in school, you remember a time someone picked a fight with you and you fought back, and maybe that actually stopped anyone from ever picking on you again. But let's just remember that like the dynamics of teen online communities are much more complex. And so there's more to that than what we can see. And I think finally the piece of advice I'd give is to really resist intervening yourself. We do see, and in particular in primary schools, some pretty horrific situations where parents have gotten involved in retaliating to support their child, and then the other parents have gotten involved, and you can see the way that things really get out of hand. Remembering that we don't always have the information. There's always more than one or two sides to the story. So that'd be my advice in terms of what not to do.
Okay. And then the flip side of that, what can we help our teenagers do when they are being bullied online?
Yeah, I think the first piece of advice I'd give where possible is to listen and suspend judgment as a very first step. As I kind of acknowledge, coming forward and opening up to your parent can be heavily stigmatized because of those risks that, you'll get your device taken away or it's only going to make things worse. And so you can defy their expectations by actually providing a compassionate and safe listening space for them where you work together to come up with solutions rather than taking their agency away. So I think that'd be the very first step. And I'd just name as well that the most important thing they've done to take care of themselves is talk to you. I think that's so important. The most important thing they've done to keep themselves safe is come forward so they're not holding it alone. And so, yeah, that's a really important thing for us to remember. I also think there are a number of strategies you can help them to work out, like have a conversation about who might be a peer, who's someone they know who might be able to stand up for them, who might be able to intervene. You can coach them towards really helpful strategies like getting a screenshot in case they need to take it to the school, or reporting it to the social media platform and working that through. They may not have considered those options. And so I think what it's all about is creating that safe listening space and then trying to work with them to come up with some strategies, so, both social and digital, that they can use to keep themselves safe.
And so I can almost already hear there might be teachers or parents thinking, I got the phone call and my child is the bully and I'm struggling to know what to do. So my question really then is, what do we do when we see a child with behaving in negative ways, treating other people unfairly? What do we do with those children to support them? Sometimes consequences are needed for the way you treat others, but how do we do that in a positive way going forward?
Yeah, there's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think, during the early 2000s, there was a real wave in restorative practices where, if someone's bullying someone else, we all sit down in a circle and we talk about the impacts of that behaviour. And, prior to that, there was a much more zero tolerance kind of punishment style approach. And for different students, you'll have different outcomes. For the student who is resistant to authority, they're going to push back on the zero tolerance and react. For the student who lacks empathy or emotional literacy or is narcissistic, is motivated by their own ego, when they sit down and talk with the student who they've harmed about the harm that they've caused, they're actually going to feel validated rather than checked on their own behaviour. And so I think that's why it's really important that, in the time that I've been working in schools, I've seen a real wave of awareness around diversity and in particular the neurodiversity of the student cohort, and understanding that, there are different drivers and levers to students' behaviour. And it's not, I think traditionally we used to just think about, boys getting punished for the bad behaviour and the girls were the ones who were relationally aggressive. But actually, what we see is a much more complex picture. So I do think there's a place for consequences in schools. There's a place for restoration. But ultimately what Project Rockit's trying to do is take a much more proactive upstream approach so that we're building the literacy and the competencies and the capabilities for students to develop resilience and emotional intelligence, and also the kind of behavioural toolkit that you were kind of referencing before, to intervene before the school even has to.
There are lots of support organisations like Kids Helpline who have many suggestions for how to cope with being bullied. So a start would be creating a safe space for you and your teen to talk about things generally and openly without interrogating them. I think our teens are so often afraid that we're going to freak out. And I know as a mum, sometimes I want to, but we've got to work at practicing staying calm. Do things that they enjoy. So this gives our young people a mental break from the stress of bullying, but help them find their tribe. Help them to spend time with friends or other groups in sport, youth, family, or neighborhoods where they can find other people they feel safe with. Build resilience by focusing on their strengths and how they are unique, because bullying can make young people not feel good enough. We chat about resilience and purpose later in this season, so look out for those. I think it's also important to remind your child that they are not the problem. People who bully often do so because of problems they are facing or struggling on their own. Of course, this is never an excuse for bullying, but it is important to talk about. Don't tell your child just to walk away. There is no evidence that this works. Get support. Bullying can be very hard to manage, and young people shouldn't have to try and solve it all on their own. So remind your child they deserve support. Talk with them about seeing a professional who they might want to work with, and help them figure out the best things to try based on their situation and who they are as a person. We need to remember as parents, every person and situation is different. Remind your child also that things do get better. I'm not saying minimize their pain, but encourage them that bullying can be stopped and does stop. Of course, there are lots of negative things that come out of being bullied, but sometimes positive things can come out of it too. For example, your child will learn how to treat others better themselves. As parents, we want to protect our children from bullying, but this is bigger than us and can often need a whole system approach. So in part 2, we will look at friends and bystanders and how to approach the school. In the meantime, if you would like to find out more about Lucy's work, you can go to projectrockit.com.au. That's Project Rockit, spelled ROCKIT.com.au. You can also find me or leave a question for a future episode via email or my Facebook page or via raisingteens.au. Or you can go to the Hope 1032 podcast page. Please subscribe and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to see you next episode, and in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adult in mind.
This episode was hosted by Collett Smart, edited and produced by Alec Green, imaging by Lucy Weil, and social media by Beth Rivers.